All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We will get started here. If you're just joining, I see some folks still coming in. Just as a reminder, we're going to do some questions and responses at the end. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the questions tab. You can also use the chat tab. We have our Director of Marketing, Rachel Snowbeck, on the call as well. So she'll be monitoring the chat and the questions. If anything comes up, any technical issues or anything like that. So, so yeah, let's get started. So my name is Ryan Wilson. I am an enterprise architect with Atmosera. I specialize in app modernization, DevOps, digital transformations, and really in the last few years been studying and learning and practicing more about the artificial intelligence space, machine learning, and then obviously within the last 6 to 9 months, really in the generative AI space. Some of my past is also in application lifecycle management, SDLC, agile transformations. So I thought it would be an interesting concept to bring these two worlds together. And how do we incorporate AI into our SDLC process? And so that's what I'll be talking about here. For the most part, this is I would say a high to mid-level type of a conversation. It goes much deeper. Given our time that we have today, I'm going to try to kind of do more of an introduction level. And then also, I wanted to do a demo of both Microsoft Copilot and GitHub Copilot. And from a Copilot perspective, it's always fun doing demos. Because it is AI, right? So you don't always get the same answers twice. Sometimes the AI hallucinates. So this is not a recorded demo. I'll be doing it live, and we'll see. We might have to make some adjustments along the way. So let's get started. All right, so first things kind of first, I'm sure everyone's aware that from an AI perspective, the impact has been just kind of crazy the last few months. I was just looking at the stock market with NVIDIA going crazy with all the AI chips that they're making. And specifically, I wanted to talk about generative AI. So for anyone not familiar, AI is a very general topic, but there's a lot of branches to artificial intelligence. And one of those branches that has been of the most interest, especially with ChatGPT, kind of becoming public, and they're talking about it in the news. It's not just us engineers and architects and technology folks discussing it, but ChatGPT, generative AI, has just been incredible. The changes that it's made in our industry. And then, of course, Microsoft's investment with OpenAI in the billions of dollars and what they're doing with Azure, OpenAI, and then with Copilot as well. So generative AI, if anyone hasn't used it, I'm assuming most on this call have, or watching this recording have used it, but it is really the ability to take a large language model, so billions and billions of data, of information. Think of scrubbing the web, over and over again, and finding patterns and being able to ask it questions and create content and curate content for you. It started with chat and text, which we'll be showing most of today, but it also has got into image generation. It's now getting into videos, and we'll see, of course, how it impacts the SDLC as well. Something that I thought was pretty interesting that I wanted to do specifically for this webinar is that this entire webinar, I should say 95% of this webinar has been done with Copilot and with AI on the side. So from the questions you received when signing up, the description of it, I of course prompted it and gave it the information that was required to say, I want to talk about this. Can you give me some ideas? And AI and I went back and forth, and it generated 95% of this content, including the images that you'll see. This presentation is actually done with Copilot, so it might look a little unconventional and maybe a little bit different with some of the information on it. Of course, I double checked it. make sure that it was accurate. But it was just something that I wanted to try, was to use AI as much as possible in creating this webinar and this presentation. So from an impact perspective, you can see some of the the numbers. They're pretty staggering when we review how impactful AI has been on the marketplace. And also one of the most one that has the most kind of impact on me is this 45% of current work activities looking to automate by 2025. So if you're not using generative AI now in your everyday life, I encourage you to try it out or reach out if you have some questions about it. I use it every day, extremely impactful. And let's get a little bit more into how it's impacting the SDLC process and what we're seeing here. All right. So some things as well that I just wanted to bring up before we get into some of the demo and kind of the cool conversation specifically around SDLC is some of the best practices and then some challenges that are still out there from an AI systems perspective. So one thing that I would keep in mind from a best practice is generative AI is great for helping us curate content. It can help create content, but not without really the proper prompting and giving it the information and knowledge and kind of context so that it can help you out as much as possible. A lot of folks think that AI can be, just go and create an application for me that does this. Not that it can't help and get you the right stuff, but it's still at the phase, right, where we need to be. It's more of an inspiration. It's more of a curation type, and then it can help developers really be quite creative in maybe exploring different ways to do things. It can also help us from, in my opinion, from a best practice perspective. It's really helping developers and everyone in the SDLC, all the way back to product managers. We'll talk about that as well, and product owners writing user stories even, just to do those mundane tasks so that we don't have to do them every day. So that's just something to keep in mind from where does generative AI fit, and we'll show some examples. And then also from a challenge perspective, ethics, regulation, so responsible and ethical AI is still honestly pretty liquid, pretty nebular when you think of what's going on with it. I think this is going to be something that most companies need to take into account when thinking about how do I onboard and embed AI into my ecosystem. And so making sure that you have the proper kind of trust gates and mechanisms in place. You're thinking about any regulatory conditions. This is something when we do sit down with customers or potential clients who are thinking about onboarding AI, we spend quite a bit of time understanding any liabilities and regulations and compliances that they have to adhere to, and making sure that AI will fit that, because you don't want to get yourself into, there's a lot of liabilities and risks. So you just have to make sure that you're taking that into account. And then also this image here, I generated as, when do, with a prompt of when do we let these robots kind of cross the street by themselves? When do we trust them? And that, of course, is coming up. We're building trust, continuously from an AI, but that's something that really needs to be at a user by user, customer by customer basis, is to look at, having AI do some curation, do some generation for you, maybe modifying, creating some code or user stories as we get into that, but then double, triple checking. And then reinforcement learning is something that we bring into the picture as well, so that we're training these systems to make sure that they're getting smarter and know about how we personally do things, or how you personally do things from a company perspective. So that's something really important to keep in mind. So although I'm going to encourage, I've already encouraged, and at the end I'm going to encourage to jump in with both feet. Just make sure that you're in a very trusted area when it comes to jumping in. So make sure you know the pond, so to speak. All right. So now specific for AI in the SDLC. So this is something when I was creating this webinar, I asked AI as well to say, where do you think that you can help from an SDLC process? And I give it some ideas, but it did pretty well. And so I broke it into basically five areas that I feel. So right in the middle here is the developer flow. So that's developer productivity. That's things like GitHub Copilot, where we will talk about today, and I'll show a little bit of a demo of that, of how engineers such as yourself or folks on your team can utilize the GitHub Copilot to help from a developer flow perspective. But kind of I want to take a middle out approach here. Is there a lot of folks are focusing on the GitHub Copilot, which is very important. It's very incredible, and we'll show it. It's really amazing. But looking at the entire value stream of your development lifecycle process, how you actually deliver products and deliver value, that starts all the way, even really pure this, but all the way at the beginning from a backlog curation perspective, right? So a product owner or manager, program manager has to create these requirements, user stories, depending on your methodology, has to create these items and curate them and you know, groom them accordingly so that they are ready to be handed off for your engineers to start working on, with AI assisting them as well. And so I actually wanted to spend a bit of time talking or actually demoing how we recommend doing some backlog curation and even test case development. I'll show some quick examples. Once again, just going to kind of, from a time perspective, just nip the surface. But I think it's important to think about that. And then we'll jump into the GitHub flow from a developer perspective, and a part of that will be some code analysis and exclamation and stuff like that, and then issue analysis as well. So when things go wrong, and it's quite possible things will go wrong on this call, and then we'll have to deal with some issue analysis from there. So, all right, so let's get into the really fun part, which is the demo. So I'm going to switch over and talk about this demo, and then we'll go through it. Once again, this is live. This is always the fun part with Copilot and AI, because you never quite know what it's going to do. So this gets really exciting for me. So this is what I've started with. So some background here is I used Copilot to start to ask it to create a high-level backlog of epics for a application that will be used for managing a portfolio of investments and trades. I find the stock market super fascinating, so I thought I would just pick on that and say, hey, what would an application look like that would manage some investing in the stock market and potentially doing some trading as well within the stock market? So we went back and forth a few times. This is the epics that it came up with. You see some of them are more kind of cross-cutting concerns, like user registration, which we're going to dig into a little bit. And then some get very specific into this domain of investing and trading, such as managing your portfolio, executing trades, real-time market data, risk analysis, and tracking. So we will jump into this user registration and authentication here. All right. So we have our first epic here, really simple, high level. Imagine you're just kind of scaffolding a backlog here. And now we want to see how Copilot can help us kind of enhance this. This would be something maybe your product owners would be doing. So so far we have just, let's implement a secure user registration and login system, including a password recovery and multi-factor authentication. And so what I've done over here in Copilot is I've given it a little bit of information. We can talk about strategies if folks have questions later or in a follow-up conversation I would have. I'm going to show how Copilot works and interact with it from a chat perspective. But in our cases, what we're normally doing with companies is integrating this directly into your system. I have a slide about that later, but actually embedding it into your processes. So this wouldn't be something that you're necessarily interacting with from a chat perspective, but I kind of wanted to show behind the scenes what's going on. And so I've given it a pre-prompt. that basically I've given it some information to say, hey, here's the epics. I want you to act like a product owner so that the AI thinks and acts and responds as a product owner. And then we're gonna ask it some questions here. So I said I was gonna give it a list of epics, and I was wondering if it could help me kind of break it down a little bit. So if there's anyone from product owner or project management or product management will be really interested in how this works. If any story writers out there. So I'm just going to say, here is our first epic. And then you don't have to watch me type. I'm going to copy and paste this over here. So I've just pasted in the first epic that it generated with the pre-prompt. Let me scroll up so you can see the pre-prompt. I've told it, act like a product manager for an application. As I described, I'm going to give you an epic and its description. I would like you to output a bulleted list of potential stories that could be created under each epic. So we're trying to break down, trying to decompose this epic. It's responded with epics that it already thinks, and I said, okay, here's our first one. So cross your fingers, let's see what happens here. Oh, great. All right. Of course, demo gods. So let me start a quick new chat here. It just timed out on me. So I'm going to give it the pre-prompt one more time. Prompt is going to take a second. And then we'll ask that question again. Sorry about that, just timed out on me. This is this response to the first one. And now we'll ask that question again. Here's the first epic. Let's see what we get. Okay, so imagine from a product owner perspective in your SDLC process, someone having to go and write all of this information out just on this one epic. So it's created a couple stories, or it's recommending a couple stories for us. User registration, it has some details of what that would look like. Email verification, a login system, password recovery. So these are those areas where I would say AI is really helping from kind of a mundane perspective. No one really wants to think about how user registration and authentication is going to work, from writing stories to creating acceptance criteria. So this is really to help us with the mundane. So we could take this information, let's take it a little bit further and say, for the login system story, let's see, it talked about a login system. All right, so for that story, let's go a little bit further. Let's provide a description and acceptance criteria, everyone's favorite, right? Okay, so let's see what it comes up for this login system story. All right, so this is something I would review and then probably feel comfortable with putting right into a user story. So the user login system allows registered users to log into their accounts, talks about credentialing, establishing sessions, and then it's given us some acceptance criteria, a login page authentication, a whole bunch of stuff. But I don't know if there's any fans of Gherkin out there, but I am a fan of Gherkin. So I'm going to say, write the acceptance criteria in Gherkin. Let's see. Oh, perfect. Okay. Great. So now I have a much more structured scenarios here for this login. So as a user, I want to log in securely so I can access my portfolio and manage my investments. It's amazing. It tied it back to the actual use case here from an app perspective. And then I have a couple scenarios that it's come up with. So successful user login. So given I'm on a login page, when I enter credentials, then and. If anyone's not familiar with this is called the Gherkin syntax, or given, when, then syntax. I just find it a little bit easier to read. But of course we have both if anyone wanted to look at a description for that. So I like how this outputted this. So let's pick another one, password recovery. And instead of writing all that again, let's just ask it, let's see, can you do the same for the password recovery feature? And I'm hoping that it'll reply with acceptance criteria in Gherkin for password recovery. And there it goes. Awesome. Okay, so you see in a relatively short amount of time, we were able to create a couple stories and even some acceptance criteria, pretty detailed acceptance criteria for those stories using AI. So that's pretty awesome. So I'm going to copy this and just kind of save this for later, because we're going to use it as we kind of simulate how this would potentially be handed off to other folks. So normally, after having these stories, the next part was from a test case perspective. So let's see if it can help us write some test cases. So let's see here. Let's move on to building test suite for this feature. And let's see, I'll put a bulleted list of test cases for everyone's curious what this is going to do. So let's do this real quick. All right, so now it's doing that same work that it did on the login, doing it for password recovery. And now we have some stories and acceptance criteria for the password recovery. Let's get it in Gherkin just real quick as well. Show this in Gherkin. Awesome, okay. While that is thinking, okay. So also from a testing scenario, or what I find pretty interesting is, at least, I've been in architecture for a while, but obviously started my career from an engineering writing code perspective, working hand in hand with quality engineers as well. And one of the things that we would always sit down and kind of try to think about together is some negative test case scenarios. So I noticed that it didn't really give us any of that. So let me find, let's have it build some negative test case scenarios. So what are some negative test scenarios I should consider in testing this feature? So this would be something that we would incorporate from a testing perspective. And now you see, this is at least from an engineering perspective, with my engineering mind, this is fantastic to think about. Okay, I'm not just going to think about my happy path and make sure that that's working. I'm now utilizing AI to give me some ideas of what could go wrong to make sure that I have code coverage on these type of scenarios. And then as well, if you were from a quality engineering perspective, you could take these and create negative test cases right off the bat. So that's pretty awesome. All right, so wanted to show that a little bit of how it works. And then let's go and just copy this real quick. We'll just put some of these details in here. Okay, perfect. So now what I wanted to show is from a coding perspective. So we're going to show off GitHub Copilot a little bit and how it could potentially utilize some of this information. A developer, an engineer, could actually utilize some of this information to make their coding a little bit better. So let me move over to Visual Studio Code. So here I have a really simple, this is not the application yet that we're building. This is just a reference Azure Microsoft that is a simple Angular application with an Entra ID backend hooking up to Azure through some APIs. We're not going to go into any of the details. I'm just going to show how kind of GitHub Copilot works a little bit. And since we're working with chat so far, I kind of want to show how the chat works. So I'm going to open up GitHub Copilot chat here. Actually, let me open up this home component. All righty. So I'm gonna first, this is our first time looking at this. Let's just ask it a simple question. What's this page doing? So this is kind of some information here. So context is everything here. So how GitHub Copilot works is it will use any tabs that you have open, and it will utilize that to answer the questions in the context that it's in. So it let us know that this is an Angular component file. It's if the user's not logged in, it displays a welcome message. If the user is logged in, it displays a secure message. It gives us some information about some of the Angular directives that are being used as well, which is pretty cool. So let's do this. We have this password reset feature that we just helped, our AI just helped us generate. So let's see if we can have Copilot from an engineering perspective help us. So let's say, can you help me create a password reset feature? Actually, I'm just going to say password reset option. Yeah, feature probably would have worked as well. Let's see. So it's giving us some steps here. Add a forget password link on your login, on form submission. So it's giving us a lot of the information here. But what I'm noticing is from an engineer perspective, this isn't quite the right place, right? This is the home component here, because that's the context that it has. So I wanted to show you how you can kind of switch the context a little bit, because there's not even a login button on this home component. That's somewhere else. So if we asked it, where's the login button, it wouldn't know because the button's not on here. So with GitHub Copilot, if I do @workspace, so now I've just changed the context of it, and now it's looking at the entire project, the entire solution, for its context of answering this question. So now I'm going to ask, where's the login button? I don't want to go find it. Let's just ask Copilot. Let's see if it can figure this out. So now it's determining where to go and look, and it's, oh, right off the bat, login button is located in the app component file. Something cool with GitHub Copilot as well with Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio. I can click on this right here, and now it's opened up this app component file for me. And look right there, there's the login button that it said. Let me know where it is. So now we're in the right place. So now we want to implement that feature, but now we're in the right place. Awesome. Okay, so let's do this. Instead of coming up with our own prompt here, let's take that use case. I'm going to switch back over real quick. Let's take this. Let's take all of this. We're gonna ask it to do quite a bit here. So now we're in the right place where we need this reset password feature to go. So I'm gonna say, given the following, this is a test case, what changes should I make to this page? Now I'm just gonna paste in that entire use case, test case. All right, let's see what happens here. So while this is thinking and generating, so we used AI to take that epic, break it into stories. We took that story and we asked it to generate some acceptance criteria and break it down further for us. It put that in Gherkin. And now we've taken that and said, hey, can you generate some test cases? Think about all the bad things that can happen as well from a negative scenario. And now we're taking that test case and prompting GitHub Copilot, helped us find where this login button is. And now it's taking that test case, all those Gherkin statements, and we're asking it to actually generate the code and say, well, how do we need to modify this page? And let's see how it did. Let's see, based on the test cases, once again, it's reiterating the steps involved. And it says here how you can modify the app component to include these features. So it looks like it's created the password reset request page for us, the password reset page with links, and the success message. This is awesome. So let's do this. So within GitHub, I can just insert here. So I'm just gonna highlight this. Let's just replace our code. Awesome. All right, so now we've taken that. Of course, we'd want to validate that this is the code that we want. But in a few steps, we've taken all the way from a user story, all the generation from there, and has actually generated the code to help us do this password reset, which is really cool. I find this really exciting. So let's go to the back end as well. So anyone familiar from an Angular perspective, this is the component from a view. Let's go to the actual code itself, which will be, we're in the app component. So here's the app component. Here's the TypeScript under here, because we need to implement So we have the login, we have the log out. We need to actually implement this password, forgot password method. So let's go down here. Let's put it here. All right. And I'm just going to use this inline here, and I'm going to ask Copilot to add the forgot password method. Let's see. Okay, now it's writing some code for me when it comes to it's taking things into account of some of these guard configs that is specific to this project. Looks like it's calling this authentication service, which is defined in another module. So it's aware that there's an authentication service from an API perspective that we've created, and it's going to go in and try to log in and handle the forgot password for us. Really cool. Of course, I can have it regenerate. I can give it more information. For this demo, let's just go ahead and accept it. And then to show off one more feature of this, if I highlight this, let's see, I'm going to click this one more time and just ask us to explain using Copilot. So now it's looking, bringing in some other references, and it's going to give us some. So this is something that I was hoping would happen, because sometimes it doesn't. So we actually have some errors in here, and this is where issue analysis and resolution comes in. So if you've noticed, it's actually given us some ideas of how to modify this to correct these errors. So it says this error message is indicating the scopes property is required. So really, this is really incredible from my perspective, right? Incredible that we've highlighted this, asked it to explain. It is going to explain it, but it notices that there's errors in there. So it's going to go and make suggestions, explain why the error is occurring, and then make suggestions that you could just copy over and have those errors fixed up. So really, really cool. All right, I'll clear this real quick. And just to show one more feature why we have this is one simple command as well from a GitHub Copilot perspective is just to generate some test cases. I'm sorry, some unit tests. So let me generate that. We don't need it for the whole workspace. We'll just add it for this app component. And as you can imagine, this will generate some unit tests for us, for the engineer, to give them kind of a head start of getting their code coverage where it needs to be. Of course, all of this needs reviewed. We need to learn how to trust AI. But this is something that really, really gives a head start for you as a developer, developers on your team. So I think this is really cool. So this is just going through creating a test fixture creating some unit tests for us. Things that most engineers don't enjoy always having to do. So this gives them a really good head start. So very cool. All right, I'll show you one more feature why we have this up. So if I go back over to this component here, let's see. It's also, I'm sure you've seen this before, but it's going to make suggestions as we go to just actually type and someone's actually coding if you don't want to interact from a chat perspective. So here, if I can kind of prompt it here with a comment and say, hey, I want to be able to create a new account. And let's see, when I press enter, let's see if it gives us some idea. Okay, great. So it's given us an idea of what can be done here. So creating a new account here with a new form to create with the email password with a simple button. Of course, we could encapsulate this into another component if we chose to, but it's nice that that just gives us a head start. So, all right, I'm going to hop back over for a second from the demo perspective. So just to recap, there was showing both Microsoft Copilot and GitHub Copilot. And then going back, I'll go back slide, from the backlog curation to test cases, we got to see how it could help developers from an engineering perspective. We did a little bit of code analysis and issue analysis by highlighting, asking it to examine and explain what was going on. And then we saw from an issue perspective, it also helped tell us what was wrong and how to potentially fix that error. So pretty cool. I still enjoy doing this stuff. Every time I see it, it still amazes me, to be honest. Okay, so kind of some final thoughts. I'll take another 10 minutes or so to wrap up and try to leave some time for questions. So one key thing to understand with this is a webinar. This is a demo. It is showing off some of the capabilities. I'm kind of showing a little bit behind the scenes of what's going on as well, but things that you can do right now. There is nothing there that you could not start doing right now. What we've noticed working with a lot of companies with this is the highest value that we have gotten or helped companies recognize is embedding these into their development ecosystem, into their processes at their SDLC as they stand. So what this looks like is Microsoft has, of course, the OpenAI. There's APIs on top of that. There is semantic kernel that helps orchestrate and do AI orchestration across processes. If you're using Azure DevOps or if you're using GitHub, there's also APIs there. And what we do is understand your process. It's agile, it's self-organizing. Everyone does things a little bit differently. And so what we can come and help you understand your processes and then see where AI can actually just embed right into what you're currently doing, right into your ecosystem. The goal is for AI to kind of be behind the scenes. The chat capabilities that I've shown is more direct and more, even that is it's saving us a tremendous amount of time, but it's still time consuming. How better would it be to have that completely embedded and incorporated into your process? So then when you write a user story, there's a custom action where it goes and generates and makes suggestions on it for you. Your product owners can approve, modify, and so on and so forth. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up. The highest value we've seen is embedding AI and orchestrating it into your current processes that stand. So some of the ways that we here at Atmosera can help kind of support you from a high level, and then we'll get into some specifics of offerings that we have. But like I said, I think the most important part is before just coming in and implementing AI is helping you to assess your actual development lifecycle process. So looking at your value stream. So if anyone's familiar with DevOps, so the value stream is from kind of soup to nuts, beginning to end, ideation of an idea, and creating a backlog, curating that backlog, all the way through the deployment, maintenance, and operations of that backlog and value stream, and deploying it to your customers. We like to look at that entire pipeline and help identify any opportunities, bottlenecks, waste. Let's just look at it from a process perspective. And then from there, we look at how can AI come in to support these processes. And so we would implement AI to support those, enhance those processes, integrate with them. They would be embedded. You wouldn't even be aware that they're there. Really neat stuff there. And then, of course, also utilizing AI so we can support you from an efficiency, quality, accuracy perspective. So making sure that it's kind of it's a double check there, right? We want to make sure that we're checking AI and learning it and reinforcing that it's following the proper procedures and the way that we do things, and it will continue to learn from you. But that also it's going and checking you, right? So we've implemented this on top of processes and maybe gates and areas like that to make sure that you're not skipping stages. Make sure your test cases are there. Make sure that they're properly formed and written. You know, what is your definition of done? Having AI check that your definition of done is met. A whole bunch of areas where it can help kind of support you on that, and where we can help support you on your journey. So you'll get a follow-up as well on this if you have any interest in these offerings that we have, but kind of wanted to go through some of them. So of course, a discovery call is something, you know, where we would go and just get an understanding, real high level, take 30 minutes, you know, but we're trying to figure out where can AI benefit your organization. So we would talk about your SDLC, talk about where you are on your AI journey. Is it brand new to you? Are you already adopting it and using it? Are you into AI orchestration and workflow management already, and reinforcement learning, or are you just using chat like I showed today? And then kind of progressing here, also an AI and SDLC workshop. So this is where we would come in we have different amounts of hour chunks, and we would sit down in a workshop type of environment, whether that's digital or in person. We would go through your SDLC. We'd understand how your people involved, your processes, and then also the products that you use, and then any pain points that you currently have. And then we would kind of strategize a little bit and get real creative as a team and partner together and figure out where we think some good ideas for AI would be able to kind of integrate and maybe do some proof of concepts or proof of values there and figure out, how can AI help fix some of those issues or enhance some of them. So that's a workshop. A more thorough offering that we have is a full DevOps assessment and then providing an integration roadmap. This normally comes with a proof of concept as well, sometimes a full implementation. So this is where we would go and do a multi-week assessment of your DevOps process and products and tools. Everyone has a little bit, how do you handle actions and workflows? What's your pipelines look like? What is your architecture and deployment? And then what are all the processes you have around that to manage it? So that would be something that we do. And then once again, talk about and implement how AI can help with that. And then a full-on strategic AI engagement. So I've had the pleasure of doing a few of these, and this is looking at what is your company's 3-year vision for how AI can strategically plug in from an SDLC process, but then also literally onboarding AI into your organization and bringing them on and embedding it and getting AI orchestration across. This is more of a think of this as a 2-month plus type of engagement would be from the strategic side. So awesome. All right, so I'm gonna see if Rachel has any questions, or feel free now to ask any questions in the questions tab or within chat. I'll bring that up as well. If anyone's having any questions there, I also like to point out I like to do questions and response, not so much questions and answers, because I don't always have the answer. For fun, I did refeed all of this presentation and information back into AI and asked it back into Copilot, and I asked it what would be some common questions that folks will ask. So maybe AI kind of figured what you would ask already, and they're on the screen here, but just wanted to point that out. So checking here, yeah, doesn't look like there's any questions right now. So awesome. Let me go to one final slide. So great. Well, thank you very much for attending, listening to me kind of talk about one of the few passions that I have. If you would, you'll get a follow-up survey through email as well, or you can just scan this QR code. This will be a survey just about the webinar, help us just get better at these webinars, help me get better as a presenter, or any questions that you have coming up. And then there's also some information if you have any interest in any of the offerings that we have as well, we can help you. So thank you again for attending, and yeah, be on the lookout. I'll keep this up for just a few moments here if someone needs to grab their phone to scan, but don't worry, we'll send a follow-up email with all this information as well. So, okay, thank you everyone.